Hi, this is Trey Fast. I'm going to do a reaction to Mr. Nightmare story. I love doing Mr. Nightmare. I haven't done one of these in a while, so I'm going to try to do three today. This is one is called Three Scary True Mansion Horror Stories. So let's get right to it. I'll be right back. And let me put my headphones in. Hey, okay. Here we go right now. Go. Mansion Horror Stories. Story 1.
There's this abandoned mansion in Toronto that came up in a group chat among my friends. We saw pictures of it through a mutual friend who had recently gone to explore there. It looked immaculate based on the pictures, and we were intrigued to go check it out. It was 10 miles north from us, so the drive wasn't bad. The mansion sat on a big open grass plain, with pine trees and other foliage surrounding the perimeter of the property, acting as a natural fence or just a wall of privacy from the outside. My friends, who I'll call Chad and Brad for this story, followed close behind me as I led the way up the large gravel driveway towards the front of the unfinished house. By the looks of it, construction on the structure had been abandoned when it was near completion, as the outside foundation seemed to be finished. Our mutual friend who found out about the place had told us that he hopped through a back window that was left unlocked, so that's what we looked for. The unlocked window turned out to be in the kitchen, right over the counter, so one at a time we squeezed through the window, crawling onto the counter and then down to the ground.
Okay.
First impressions in the kitchen, almost immaculate, minus a few of the cabinet doors sprawled out on the floor as if they had yet to be installed, and just things like sheetrock boards laying around. But everything seemed new, and it was a shame the construction was abandoned. The three of us kind of went our own directions in the house.
Okay.
I went towards the living room, which again was almost pristine. It was a huge room that transitioned into the dining room, and then from there, a wide hallway with at least 10 different doors. My friends were already checking out some of the rooms in this hallway. I peeped into each room and realized most of them were bedrooms. At the end of the hall was a 3-door garage. The last door in the hall before the garage was the basement.
Okay.
I called to Brad and Chad that I was checking out the basement. I got an acknowledgement from at least one of them. The basement had this bizarre spiral staircase, so when I got to the bottom, I couldn't even see the door at the top. There were no windows down there, so besides my flashlight, it was pitch black. It was a completely unfinished basement. Pieces of drywall everywhere, unfinished wood foundation where walls should be, but the basement was huge. Like there were multiple sections down there. It was big enough to fit a basketball court and more.
Jesus.
Then I came across this back room with a few storage containers. I was here to explore after all, so I curiously started lifting the lids off the containers.
Oh boy.
The first two seemed to contain building tools and supplies like wood planks. But then I heard something from one of the other containers. It was like something caused the container to make a bump sound.
Uh-oh.
Could it be an animal? Or was I just hearing things? I went to the container and noticed the lid was not sealed on this one, as it wasn't sitting perfectly snug on the top. As I bent over to try and lift the lid, it lifted without me touching it. I heard a whispering noise. I fell backwards on my hands as this happened, and while I was on the ground, I saw a smiling woman looking at me. The only thing lifting the container up was her head. She looked at me, laughed, and said peekaboo. And she laughed some more. I ran to the top of the stairs, but the basement door was now locked. I banged on it for my friends to open it up, but they were apparently messing with me. I heard creaks on the spiral staircase below me. I couldn't see her yet, but I could hear her laughing getting closer, and she was mumbling incomprehensible things. I screamed at the top of my lungs to please help me, and Chad finally opened the door. I ran out and looked back for half a second, greeted by this ghostly, skinny figure of this pale woman looking up at me, almost at the top step. I slammed the door shut and locked it. Chad saw the woman too, and we bolted for the front door. We didn't care about leaving it open. The three of us got to the edge of the property to talk. After an hour of just sitting in my car thinking and talking, I agreed to go back inside and unlock the basement door. As scary as what I witnessed was, I didn't want to be responsible for someone dying down there. But when we got back inside, the basement door was wide open. I promise you we locked that door, so it made no sense. We once again bolted back outside towards the car and drove home, and never returned to that mansion again.
Idiots. Went back. Story 2.
When I was a very young kid, we lived in an upper middle class neighborhood. lots of space between each house. All the houses on our street were very nice, but there was one abnormally large house. It was closer to a mansion. It sat right across the street from us, and my bedroom window could look across to the windows of the mansion. Since our street was incredibly low traffic, our parents let us play soccer in the street. So my two friends, Brian and Zeke, were playing soccer one sunny day. It was usually just the three of us, so we had this kind of free-for-all version of soccer that we made up. Eventually the ball was kicked onto the property of the mansion, so I ran over to get it. When I picked up the ball, I looked at all the windows to see if the house owner was possibly witnessing me on his property. But at one of the top windows was a young boy who looked to be about our age. I hurried off the property and back to my friends. I asked them if they had ever seen the kid who lives in that mansion, and they hadn't. The second time I looked back at the window, the boy was no longer there. It wasn't for a while after that, probably a month, that I was in my room playing Nintendo, and for whatever reason I got up to get something, and I looked out my window across to the mansion, and I saw that boy at the window again. He was surely looking at me, all the way from across the street. It kind of creeped me out. I walked away from the window to ignore it. Why hadn't I ever seen that kid outside before? Come to think of it, why hadn't I ever really seen the owners of that house? I asked my parents about the boy across the street. They said they were pretty sure there was no boy in that house. So the next time Brian, Zeke, and I were playing in the street, we were thinking of potential fourth players to have a real game. I had an idea. I ran to the front door of that mansion and rang the bell. A 50-something-year-old woman answered. I asked if her son wanted to play soccer with us. She looked at me puzzled and said, "What son?" I replied, "The boy who was always at the upstairs window." I can't describe the look on her face besides shock and fear. She asked me what the boy looked like, and after my best description, a tear rolled down her cheek, and she put her hands over her mouth. She brought me upstairs to the room where I kept seeing the boy. It was a boy's bedroom. She showed me a picture of a kid, and asked me if this was the boy I was seeing, and I said yes. She told me that was her 8-year-old son, Charlie, who died 10 years ago. That woman living there had been alone ever since she lost her son and husband. She believed what I said because I nor my parents would have ever had any way of knowing about her son. She didn't tell me or my parents what happened to her husband or son. As sad as this all was, it was still horrifying. There was one other time I saw the boy. I was in my room, months later, and I looked out my window to the woman's mansion across the street. There he was again, at the upstairs window. I could tell he was looking at me. I shut my blind with force and tried to forget about it. It still sends shivers up my spine when I think back on it.
Ghost. Story 3.
I was once hired to house sit for a friend of a family friend who was going away for a week. In this case, I should call it mansion sit because the family was absolutely loaded, and the mansion sat on the rich side of town in front of a huge lake. I was 21, and it just seemed like a cool job to have for a week. The family's one rule was to throw no parties and no more than 2 guests at any time, which even that I thought was generous of them. The father's name was Benjamin, and that's the only name you'll need to know. Ben left me a list of things to keep track of every night, which included feeding the 2 cats and 2 parrots, watering the plants, among other things that really won't contribute to the story. The house was a half hour from home, so instead of just driving there and back every day, I opted to just sleep in one of the guest bedrooms, which they offered to me after all. The first day there, I got there very late, so it was a short one that got me kind of warmed up for what to expect the week ahead of me. After doing the insignificant amount of morning chores, I hopped in the pool they had in the backyard. The pool literally overlooked a gorgeous, tranquil lake, and even with the thought of getting to enjoy this unbelievable house for a week, I was still incredibly jealous. As I was in the pool, I noticed through the giant floor-to-ceiling windows to the living room somebody walking inside. I jumped out from the pool, freaking out. I ran to grab the towel and dry myself for a second before storming inside, yelling, "Excuse me." I didn't see anyone in the living room, so I entered the kitchen, and there was a fairly large Hispanic woman who looked to be about 35 to 40. She was just standing there as if waiting for me. I asked her who she was and why she was here while trying to keep myself composed and confident. She said in a thick accent that she was the maid who came every day to clean the floors and stuff. She introduced herself as Eliza. I instantly felt a sense of relief and introduced myself as Mike, the guy who was house sitting for the week. She spoke in as little words as possible. I don't think her English was too good, but she basically said she was going to clean the floors in the kitchen and living room now. I said that was completely fine and let her do her thing. I asked her how she got in the house, and she said she had her own copy of the key. So that was that. I went back out to the pool for a little longer to let her do her thing. When I got out from the pool, I dried up and took a shower. After my shower, I fed the animals again. The parrots were easier than the cats, surprisingly. I didn't see the maid again, but I didn't really want to get in her way and have awkward small talk with someone who could barely speak English anyway. I had a couple friends over that night because everyone was eager to see the place, but I respected their rules of only 2 guests at a time. I gave them the best tour I could. Then we kinda just chilled in the game room they had, played some air hockey and pool table, and drank a little bit. When I told my friends about the cleaning lady scaring the hell out of me, they both found it insanely suspicious. Like, why wouldn't Ben have told me about the cleaning lady? They brought up a good point, so I shot Ben a text, asking about the cleaning lady. He didn't answer right away, and I didn't want to call. My friends wanted to sleep over, but I didn't want to push it. I had no idea if they had cameras in the house or not. So they left, and quickly after I started getting myself ready to lay down in bed. At some point I got a text back from Ben, apologizing for taking so long, and then asking what cleaning lady, with 2 question marks and an exclamation point. I typed back, Eliza, the Hispanic woman who came by and claimed she was the cleaning lady. That's when Ben called me with a concerned voice. He got more details from me after telling me there was no cleaning lady. That was the whole reason they hired me. I felt like I had been taken for a fool. But more importantly, I was terrified that I may not have been in that house alone at that very moment. Ben told me to just hide in a bedroom and that he'd call the police for me. So we hung up, and I waited in the room for the police to arrive. I had Ben on FaceTime when the police arrived, so he could also talk to them. We all looked through the house together, from top to bottom, and we didn't see anyone. I told Ben the lady said she had a spare key, but he said he was confident that that was a lie, because they never made any spare keys. He was confident she simply snuck in when I was in the pool or outside in general. After we were sure there was no one in the house, the police left, but they made sure I locked all the doors and windows before they did so. I spoke with Ben a little longer, who was very comforting, and asked I just hold down the fort and call the police if anything else should happen. We hung up, and I went to bed. I locked the door, of course. I left the air conditioner off so I could hear any potential noises from outside of the room. As I lay awake, subconsciously waiting for a noise, I heard one from under the bed. It sounded like a squeak on the wood floor. I hopped out of the bed and looked under it. There were 2 people hiding underneath. One was the lady from earlier, Eliza. The other was some man, probably 10 years older than her, with his hand over her mouth. They both locked eyes with me. I screamed and I ran for the door. The moment that it took me to unlock the door and then open and shut it was more than I was comfortable with. As I did, I heard them crawling out from the bed. I ran outside to my car without my shoes and drove down the street, where I called the police, and then I called Ben again. I waited for police cars to pass, and then I followed them. We once again searched the whole house and found no one. This time I didn't stick around for the night. Ben told me to go home and stay safe. The family booked a flight back home the next day, cutting their vacation short. The intruders were never identified. All that can be speculated is they walked in through the front door while I was in the pool because I didn't lock the door, and that they somehow knew the family would be gone. No further info is known.
Jesus. Oh boy. That was intense. Ooh. Very intense. Okay, that first story with the friends, exploring that mansion in Toronto, and then him going downstairs to the basement by himself, which was again another mistake, and then some woman lifting out of the crate. Oh man, I would have had a heart attack on the spot. No, he compose himself to run upstairs and stuff, and then the door's locked, of course, naturally. And his friend finally let him out, and then the friend can see the woman, and then he locks the door. And then, for some inexplicable reason, he felt guilty and decided to go back into the house, which was insane in itself. Come on. Again, that could have been maybe a homeless person just living down there. Although why she would be in a box, I don't know, a crate. That part I don't understand. Okay, but that's just freaky. Okay. Now for the second story, with the guy, seeing the figure in the window, I don't believe in ghosts, so I don't know if that's, or maybe it was a ghost that he saw, because obviously the woman knows her son is dead. Okay, so there's no other explanation for that. It's just freaky. If he, maybe he is haunting, maybe he's haunting that room and stuff, because you never know how he died. Maybe he's haunting and he needs to be released. Okay, if you believe in that sort of thing. I don't believe in ghosts. Okay, now the third story was the freaky one. Okay, because you expect nobody to be in the house, and then somebody pops up there and says she's a cleaning woman. Okay, and then later you find them underneath your bed. Oh my God, I probably would have had a heart attack right there. Especially since everything's quiet in the house, and then you hear a creak underneath the bed, and you look under and you see two people underneath the bed. I'd have probably had a heart attack right on the spot. But obviously, maybe that's how that area is. But that could be maybe homeless people that live, especially if you got a big gigantic mansion, something like that. And if you don't have security around the clock or something like that, there's nothing stopping anybody from wandering into the house and living in a portion of the house. Especially, I could figure that probably may happen more than you think. Especially if you got a big mansion, something like that, and if it's only maybe two people living in there, or even just three, and you only go to certain parts of the house, you don't go through every part of the house. That's why if you're gonna buy a big house, something like that, you're gonna have to have security, with security on all the doors and all that stuff, and security on the outside, because there's no way in the world to stop somebody from just roaming that house, especially if you go on vacation or something, and then somebody wants to stop somebody unless you got security from rumbling into the house. And like I said, he said he left the front door open. So, and maybe these people, the woman and the man that's been living in there, but knows when the family goes on vacation, and then they come out, so they could be living in another part of the house for all this time, and then heard the family go on vacation and stuff, and didn't plan on you being there. And then of course you busted the woman, then she had to make up a story on the spot. So it's never, that's why you got to be careful, especially in a big mansion. But then again, rich people, if you're rich enough to afford a mansion, you should rich enough to have security. Like I said, it means security, have every part of that house, like I said, have security on the doors, codes and stuff on the door, and alarms and stuff, and lights and stuff and everything. Because because like I said, what's to prevent anybody from just wandering into the house and saying, okay, well, let me, like I said, a homeless person or something, or a transit, and say, somebody sees a big mansion and looks like it's empty, so and they could break in and just squat in the house. I think that happens more than you think, unless you have security. That's the only way to stop that from happening. Anyway, let me know what you think of these three scary mansion stories. I think the last story is the scariest to me. Okay, the second story could have been a ghost, or he could have been seeing something. That could be just his imagination stuff. The first story, again, that could have been a homeless woman just living in that house. Okay, because it's an abandoned mansion and stuff, and so you could have had this homeless woman living in that house. So, but I think the third story is the freakiest for me. Anyway, let me know what you think of this story from Mr. Nightmare. I'll leave a link to Mr. Nightmare's channel in the description box so you can check the stories out for himself. I love his stories. I have links to my social media in the description box, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I also have a link to my other channel, Paul's Views and Opinions. Please check that out as well. And this is Trey Pastor saying so long and take care.